Not sponsored, but absolutely wish I was. Also fully aware that I need a haircut. Anyway, today the topic is the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus. I was about to say S10 Plus there. And the reason I was about to say that is because I actually would have preferred the S10 Plus, but thus we've got the Note 10 Plus. The reason I've got this today is because of Damien Wilde, so please do check out his YouTube channel for more reviews. He's actually posting a lot more frequently to there, and yes, he did call me out for calling him out in a video, which was absolutely brilliant. I made a bit of a hate video way back on Android Authority when the Note 10 Plus came out, saying that I actually preferred the S10e, and I actually thought that the Note 10 Plus coming out kind of highlighted all the reasons I liked the S10e, because I don't think it's a very good value for money phone. However, as always, Damien asked me if I wanted to check one out, and I kind of wanted to go because I've been kind of hating on this phone for so long now. I actually wanted to give it a go and see if it was as bad as I thought it was. So hey guys, my name is Ryan Thomas, and this is the Note 10 Plus some months later. I want to first talk about the design because it is absolutely stunning from the front, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Now, some might prefer a notch, some might prefer a motorized camera system, and some might prefer a hole punch. Now, I'm personally part of the water droplet notch gang because I don't like moving parts in my phones, and it's really weird to explain this, but the hole punch is kind of just like a blot on the screen instead of just the screen kind of curving around, if that makes sense. I don't know, some of you might get it, some of you might not. Either way, this is probably the best looking to most people. It's just not how I personally like my phones. I kind of prefer the OnePlus 6T looking kind of look to the design, but this, by pretty much every other account, is fantastic. So it's got incredibly thin bezels and curved edges that aren't quite as heavy as the ones on the Mate 30 Pro, so it's a little bit easier to hold. It's also got pretty much no forehead, and the chin is absolutely minute, which is really nice. It's still not conform to the rest of it, but the chin being this thin is probably the thinnest I've ever seen. It just looks absolutely stunning. The whole thing is screen, and a massive screen, but we'll get to that a little bit later. The buttons being all on one side is kind of cool, I like that, but they're on the wrong side. I would have much preferred to see them on the right hand side where I'm used to seeing them on like Pixels and Huawei phones and things like that. But I digress. When you go around to the back, that's where things get a little bit meh for me. Now, I don't really like this Aura Glow color, but that's very subjective. The color thing is kind of, you know, you either like it or you like something that's more stealthy, like a black or a dark gray, and I actually much prefer that color than this. Either way, if I owned this thing, which I don't, if I did, I'd put a case on it anyway, so it doesn't really matter all that much. But the thing that really bugs me is that camera bump in the top right. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, whoa, every phone's got a camera bump these days, and that's absolutely right. In my opinion, the S10 Plus had it best. It had the horizontal camera bump, everything was self-contained, it looked very unique and kind of just clean, really. Whereas the Note 10 Plus takes a page out of Apple's book and Xiaomi's book, and you know what? Every single mid-range phone, they all look exactly the same. They've got a kind of vertical camera array in the top left, and the logo in the middle. It just looks unoriginal, and if I'm honest, I think it kind of looks ugly. I did complain about this with the iPhone 10 and the Xiaomi Mi A2 and the Mi A2 Lite, and it's a similar thing across all of mid-range smartphones these days. But the fact that the Note 10 Plus is not mid-range, it's one of the most expensive phones you can buy, and it has this layout. It just doesn't. There's a bike outside. Yeah, giving it beans. Giving it beans, are ya? Moving on from that, we have got the S Pen, which is something that a lot of people absolutely love. I think it's really useful for marking up screenshots, and the main thing for me is definitely signing online e-documents. That's something that I loved with the Note 8 that I used for extended period of time, and the Note 4 that I used for extended period of time. It's not something that I love so much that I would only own a Note for, and I know there are a lot of people like that just cannot live without the S Pen. I'm personally not in that camp. I really like it, but it's not necessarily something I could not live without. We get IP68 water and dust resistance, which is nice in a phone that looks this pretty. I'm pretty sure that every phone should have it, but the ones with the mechanical motorized camera systems don't have it for obvious reasons, so I think it's a bit of a shame when phones don't have it. Either way, the fact that this has it is fantastic. It's built really well, feels really strong, really rigid, doesn't flex at all. It's a good phone that's honestly going to last a lot of people a long time as long as you put a case on it, because it's very slippery. Back to the screen, it's a 6.8 inch Quad HD Plus display, and it is by far the best display I've ever seen on any smartphone ever. It is stunning. It wows people as soon as they turn it on. It's different in every single way. It's got incredible colours, incredibly deep blacks due to the fact that it's an OLED. The colours are actually quite accurate, and the main thing, it gets unbelievably bright, and that's something that we rarely see on phones that are more towards the colour accurate side of things. Now, this display's clearly had a lot of money, time and effort put into it, and I mean, it just goes to show. But the main thing to me that stands out, other than the brightness, is the fact that it's a 6.8 inch display, which maybe 3 or 4 years ago was about tablet size. And now it's full on like phone size, large phone size. Phablet, I don't know, I don't really like that term. Some people want to call it a phablet. I call it a large phone. I personally like kind of around 6 inch phones, 6.1, 6.2. And this is a little bit big for me. The fact that I'd have to put a case on it as well means it would be really, really big and it would kind of be unwieldy. This thing already sticks out of my jeans pocket, so yeah. Either way, something I wanted to get onto is the fact that I rarely, if ever, watch films on my phone. And I was able to watch films on this thing just due to the size of the screen. It kind of made it possible, or made it more that I wanted to watch things on this phone, as opposed to going, yeah, you know what, I need a bigger screen, let me get a laptop, let me get a computer or a TV, something like that. I was very content sitting there watching something on a screen this big. Monster break here. Rounded corners, in my opinion, are the best on this display compared to everything else. And that might seem really picky, but there are a lot of displays out there, particularly from the likes of OnePlus, that have really, really wide radii rounded corners, and these are nice and acute. They're tight, they kind of make it more square, if anything, because I really think that those wide rounded corners look cheap and they look tacky, gimmicky, cartoony, whatever you like. I just think that these look so much better. So please let me know in the comments, because that's something that Samsungs have had like in trend for a long time. They've had quite tightly rounded corners compared to the competition, and I'm not sure if anyone really picks up on that, but for me it just looks way better. I don't know, I want to hear your thoughts on that. Moving on to battery life now, and it's not fantastic, it's not great. It's a 4300 mAh battery, which really isn't very big for a phone with a 6.8 inch screen. Now I understand why they had to do this, because they needed to fit the kind of barrel for the S Pen in the side, but for me this is one of the very main reasons you should go for the S10 Plus instead, aside from a bunch of other reasons. Maybe I should make a video on that, I don't know. But this just has too small a battery. Now the charging is incredibly quick. It might not be the fastest in the world, but it's still very, very quick, and it tops this thing up really well with the included charger, which is really nice. The lack of a headphone port for me is something that I think I can live without, but I'm not sure if everyone else can, being Samsung fans or whatever. You get 15 watts of wireless charging, which is decent. You know, that's almost the fast charging spec of the iPhone, and it's the wireless charging on this. So, you know, props for that. And the 9 watt power share, wireless power share, is good as well. It's a lot quicker than some of the others that I've tried. So what the Samsung Note 10 Plus, you know, loses in battery, it more than makes up for in charging ability, and that is something that you need. I'm glad they made up for it there. Some phones are just worse across the board, which sucks. You shouldn't buy those phones, but this one, I've got to admit, I did leave on the Quad HD Plus setting. Now you kind of have to go into the settings and enable whether you want, you know, auto switch, Full HD Plus or Quad HD Plus. I said it's Quad HD Plus because I actually wanted to, I mean, the phone costs £1,100. I kind of wanted to see what the screen looked like at full chat, and yeah, I left it like that. So that's probably the reason I didn't get amazing battery life. I did still get a full day, which is okay, but I mean, these days battery tech is getting so advanced that the 1 day battery life is kind of like right down at the bottom. You start there and you work your way up, and if you can't get to a full day, then you honestly shouldn't be making smartphones, let's be honest. Performance is like you'd expect from an £1,100 phone. You get 12 gigabytes of RAM. I think this has like 512 gig of storage. You can go up to a terabyte. High-end processor. I don't know what to say in these performance segments anymore, because once you buy a flagship, you just kind of got everything you'd ever need. You can edit video on your phone, you can make movies, I suppose, on your phone. But for the other 99% of people who are going to buy this and just simply scroll through Facebook and Twitter, maybe Instagram, maybe take a couple of photos here and there, which sadly is what people do when they spend £1,100 on a smartphone, you're fine. I mean, you were fine back at £100, let alone £1,100. There we go. Having a larger screen with a higher resolution obviously gives you more screen real estate, and you can see more at once, which I suppose some people might like, being that it's a 6.8-inch display. But I mean, I don't know what to add on to that. It never stuttered for me. One UI 2 is really nice. I really like that Samsung moved to One UI. I think it's a brilliantly laid out piece of software, and I actually take it over stock Android just for the extra functionality that you get with it. And the fact that you can turn off the Samsung/Microsoft partnership apps, like all of the Microsoft Office, the fact you can turn that off when you first log into the phone and set it up is really good, because you typically in the past just had a folder of extra stuff that you just didn't want, but now you can turn that off so that they're not permanently installed on the phone, which is really impressive to see from a company that was just a few years ago known for the worst software on any Android phone. Another monster break, crikey. Software updates should last 3 years, however full Android updates should probably last maybe one more generation. A lot of Samsung phones of recent have had trouble getting the latest version of Android on the smartphone, so I'd be surprised if we get Android 12 on this thing, but Android 11 is pretty much a given. Just might take some time. Now the camera, we've got 3 cameras. We've got a 12 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel telephoto, and a 16 megapixel ultra wide angle camera. And then on the front we've got a 10 megapixel with a slightly closed down aperture compared to the previous versions, just to make that punch hole just a little bit smaller. And you know what, the cameras, as I say on most Samsungs these days, they're just really good. You actually do want a lower resolution 12 megapixel sensor that's larger, as opposed to something that's 48 or 64 or 108 megapixels that's binned down. That's actually a worse solution than just making a bigger sensor with bigger photo sites. Now Samsung's kept with this, however there's strong rumours to suggest that the S11 or S20 or whatever it is will have 108 megapixel binned sensor. That's something else, but we're talking about the performance of this camera today. Now I think it's really good. I've always been a fan of Samsung's app, apart from when they went to One UI 1 I believe it was, or Samsung Experience just before One UI, and they had a bit of a weirdly laid out camera app, but before then, back on 6.0 and now on One UI 2, they just make really good camera apps. Now they're not quite on Huawei's level, you don't quite get as much functionality there, however it is pretty close. It's closer than you might expect. It's far better than OnePlus's, far better than Google's, far better than Apple's, far better than Xiaomi's, but just slightly below Huawei. So, you know, I'm always going to like camera software that's similar to Huawei stuff because it's my favorite, and in my opinion, it's just by far the best. Now, the results from this camera app are really nice photos. You get a pretty easy to use system, and that means that you can take photos in all 3 modes, telephoto, wide and ultra wide, pretty much all at once. And that's what I tend to do when I take a photo for testing, for when I review a phone. I'll typically take one in each of those focal ranges and then kind of do that for every single photo, so that I've got a nice range of stuff to play with and to really analyze the results. Colors are a little bit much sometimes. They're still not as bad as Xiaomi or Realme or even Honor, because those cheaper phones tend to just push the saturation for some reason, but it's absolutely not like its previous self. HDR is, well, it's had a massive improvement since the last Note that I used for a long time, which was the Note 8, and having an ultra wide camera on a Note is, I don't know why people don't use ultra wides. I've got to not have this rant because I do it in every single video, but the images from this phone just look brilliant. They're sharp, they're detailed. They might not be as detailed as something with a 48 megapixel sensor that's not being binned. However, you're going to get better dynamic range, better colors, better accuracy, stuff like that by going with a sensor and a product suite like this, like from Samsung. I took some photos at the beach, I took some selfies. I think the portrait mode has been pretty dramatically improved as well. I took some fairly difficult to process photos in terms of portrait mode, and I was able to get decently clean results, which is something that in the past hasn't really been possible with Samsung phones. I think this has got to be one of the most underratedly kind of improved camera systems that I've seen on a smartphone for a long time. Is again still not Huawei's level, still not quite Pixel's level in terms of portrait mode and HDR, but it's right up there, and actually sometimes it does beat those phones. It all depends on the lighting conditions. I did take some photos in the dark. I took this photo of the stars. I don't think there's much that really competes with this in terms of that. The Pixel's astrophotography mode has never really worked very well for me, but that's just maybe a personal thing. Enough about the cameras, let's talk about pricing and availability, which is something that is naturally going to be a little bit hard to talk about in terms of a Note. Now, in terms of value for money, this thing is god awful and you should avoid it like the plague. If you're looking for a high-end Samsung with decent battery life, a headphone port, and much better value for money, you should absolutely go for the S10 Plus, because that is the best value Samsung right now. I think the S10e is a good value, however it does miss out on having a nice big screen and having that telephoto lens and a larger battery, although I do really like the S10e. Who is this for? Well, it's for people who are going to spend lots of money on a phone, such as the people who are going to buy iPhone 11 Pro Maxes, the Huawei Mate 30 Pro. Is there another expensive phone? Probably, but you know, it's for those kinds of people. It's not for people who want value for money. And if you're looking for that, I don't know why you're looking into a Note in the first place. The Note 9 is still a really good phone if you can get it fairly cheap, like sub £400. Still a very good phone. So if you're looking for a Note, looking for that S Pen, you should still go for that. But the Note 10 Plus is better than I thought it was. It's not like a OnePlus, because a OnePlus feels nice, but it doesn't feel, there's just something not quite with it that's on this Note 10, that's not on other phones. This just feels a cut above the rest, and the only other phone that's ever got close to that is the Mate 30 Pro. And you know what, that's a phone I'd still have for its software and for its cameras. And with that, I want to give a massive shout out to Damien Wilde again for lending me this smartphone to review. I think he said he needed it back, but then I requested an extra few days and he lent me that for another few days. So I really do appreciate him, and I appreciate his channel as well. So please do go and check out his videos. He's releasing a couple more coming into the next couple of weeks, which is really good to see because he was lacking on the video side on his channel for a long time. I also want to give a massive shout out to my patrons who are supporting me even throughout times where I'm not uploading as much. However, I don't think I've really missed an upload in the month of January, which is quite special for me. You wait, February comes around, no upload for another 4 months. Anyway, if you like this video, please do like it, and if you disliked it, you can hit that button as well and tell me in the comments what you thought. Did you hate this video? Have you got a Note 10 Plus? Have you got the standard Note 10? Do you want a Note 10 Plus? Are you waiting for the Note 20 or Note 11? Whatever. Anyway, let me know, and please do subscribe if you're new around here to never miss a video like this one. I've been Ryan Thomas, and this has been my Galaxy Note 10 Plus review. Take care. Peace.